I never thought that one letter would destroy everything for my family. But when the HOA banned us from visiting our own property, they didn't know that I was about to bring the FBI down on them. It all started on a Tuesday afternoon, a day just like any other. The sun was shining, the air was warm, and I was heading home after a long day at work. As I pulled into the driveway of my house in Pine Hill Estates, everything seemed perfect. My wife and kids were inside, and I had a quiet evening ahead of me. But then I saw it. There it was, sticking out of my mailbox. A crisp white envelope with the Pine Hill Estates Homeowners Association logo stamped in gold at the top corner. My hands instantly trembled. No one likes getting mail from the HOA, but I had never had an issue with them before. In fact, I prided myself on keeping our property in top shape, everything neat and orderly, just as they liked it. I ripped open the envelope, my heart pounding in my chest as I unfolded the letter. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. Dear Mr. Thompson, this notice serves as a formal warning regarding the unauthorized use of your property. I paused, my mind racing. Unauthorized use? What could they possibly be talking about? I had lived here for 5 years without issue. My garden was well kept, my lawn was pristine, and I followed every rule to the letter. I read on, my stomach sinking as I saw the next line. Effective immediately, you and your family are hereby banned from visiting your property. Further access will be prohibited unless authorized by the HOA board. Failure to comply will result in fines. I dropped the letter, my breath caught in my throat. Banned from my own property? How could they do that? I looked up from the letter, staring at my front yard. The house I had worked so hard for. The home I had spent years making a sanctuary for my family. And now, just like that, the HOA had taken it all away. My mind raced. There had to be some kind of mistake. I immediately grabbed my phone and dialed the HOA office, trying to stay calm. I wasn't about to let them do this without a fight. The phone rang twice before a smooth, practiced voice answered. Pine Hill Estates HOA. This is Monica speaking. How can I assist you? Hi, Monica. This is David Thompson. I just received a letter saying I'm banned from visiting my own property. Can you explain what this is about? There was a brief pause on the other end, followed by a sigh. Mr. Thompson, I'm afraid that this is a decision made by the board. The HOA has determined that your property does not meet community standards. As of now, all residents are restricted from entering properties deemed in violation. Wait, I interrupted. You're telling me that you've banned my family from visiting our own house? For what? What violation? Again, this is a decision made by the board, and unfortunately, I cannot disclose the exact details at this time. However, if you'd like to appeal, you can schedule a meeting with the board next week. Next week? Couldn't believe it. I was being told I couldn't even step foot on my own property until I had an official meeting. Something didn't sit right with me. Something felt off, and I wasn't about to let them get away with this. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. This was insane. I walked up to the front door, staring at the house that I had worked so hard to make a home. The thought of being banned from it felt like a violation in itself. But I wasn't just going to sit back and take it. I needed answers. I walked across the street to my neighbor, Greg's house. He had lived here almost as long as I had, and he was always the go-to guy when it came to dealing with anything related to the HOA. If anyone could shed some light on what was going on, it was him. Greg was out on his porch, sipping iced tea. When he saw me walking toward him, he raised an eyebrow. What's up, Dave? You look like you've seen a ghost. I handed him the letter. They banned my family from visiting our own house, I said, my voice shaking. Can you believe this? He took the letter, his brow furrowing as he read through it. Man, this is messed up. I've heard some things about the HOA lately, but nothing like this. I'll tell you one thing, though. You're not the only one. A few other families have had similar issues. The HOA has been cracking down hard lately, and it seems like they're targeting certain people. Targeting people? I asked, my confusion deepening. What do you mean? Greg looked around to make sure no one was listening. It's Judith Winters. She's the new HOA president. She's been on a power trip since she got in. No one has been safe from her strict rules. But this, banning people from their homes? That's next level. Judith Winters. The name made my stomach churn. I knew who she was. She had only recently taken over the position of president. But I had no idea she was capable of this kind of cruelty. And I certainly hadn't realized how much power she had managed to accumulate in such a short amount of time. I don't understand, I said, trying to make sense of it all. Why would she ban us from visiting our own house? What could we possibly have done wrong? Greg leaned in, lowering his voice. It's not just about you, man. It's about control. And money. They're trying to push people out of certain homes, get them to sell, and then they turn around and make a profit. They've been doing it for a while. You're just the next target. The more Greg spoke, the more my anger began to boil over. This wasn't just about some petty rule enforcement. This was about greed and control. The HOA, led by Judith Winters, was systematically driving people out of their homes to line their pockets. It was corrupt and it was wrong, and I wasn't about to let them get away with it. I couldn't stand there, helpless, waiting for the HOA to dictate my family's future. I needed to take action. But what could I do? They had all the power. They controlled the neighborhood. Or so I thought. As I stood there on Greg's porch, staring down at the letter, an idea began to form in my mind. What if I wasn't the only one? What if I could rally others to fight back? Maybe, just maybe, we could take them down. That night I couldn't sleep. The thought of being banned from my own property kept running through my mind. I had to find out more. I had to dig deeper. So I started doing research. I found out about the HOA bylaws, about the legal procedures they had to follow. I dug up old meeting minutes, property records, and even spoke to a few other residents who had been targeted by the HOA. It became clear that this wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a pattern. Judith and the HOA were systematically bullying people who didn't fit their mold. By the time the sun rose, I knew what I had to do. I needed to take this fight to the next level. The FBI needed to know about the corruption within the HOA, and I wasn't going to back down until they did. I didn't know exactly how to start, but I had the evidence, and soon I would have the support of my neighbors. Together, we could bring them down. The next morning, I woke up with a clear plan in mind. The fear and confusion that had clouded my thoughts over the past few days had started to dissolve into something much stronger. Determination. Judith Winters and the HOA weren't going to get away with this. Not on my watch. I grabbed my phone and made a call to a lawyer I'd known from my college days, Dylan. He had always been the guy people turned to when they were dealing with property rights issues. If anyone could help me navigate this mess, it was him. Dylan, it's David Thompson, I said when he picked up. I need help with something. The HOA has banned my family from visiting our house. They've issued a fine, and I think they're violating our property rights. There was a brief silence on the other end. David, I'm sorry to hear that, but that sounds like more than just a civil matter. You said they banned you from your property? You need to take this seriously. I know, I replied, my voice shaking with frustration. But it's not just that. I've got a bad feeling about this. I think they're doing this to multiple families. I need someone to look into it. Could you help? Dylan paused for a moment, then sighed. I'll help, but we're going to need more than just your word. You need to start documenting everything. Emails, letters, any communications with the HOA. And don't delete anything. Get everything in writing, and I'll help you build a case. I could feel a surge of hope. Finally, someone on my side. Someone who knew what they were doing. Thanks, Dylan. I'll get on it right away. I spent the next few days gathering evidence, poring through old HOA meeting minutes, and even knocking on neighbors' doors to ask if they had been affected. Each conversation revealed more disturbing patterns. Neighbors who had been fined for tiny, petty violations, families whose properties had mysteriously been targeted for random inspections, and others who had received notices similar to mine. This wasn't just about me, it was a widespread issue, a systemic abuse of power that needed to be exposed. I took photos of every letter, every fine, and every report I could find. I even started recording my conversations with the HOA, making sure I had a paper trail. I wasn't about to let them silence me. As I was digging through some old HOA records in my attic, I found something strange. It was a folder with my name on it. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it, only to find a set of documents outlining a suspiciously large number of violations against my property. But none of these violations had been mentioned in any of the notices I'd received. These were new, fabricated violations designed to push me out. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the documents. It was clear to me now Judith Winters and the HOA board had been keeping a hidden agenda. They weren't just enforcing rules. They were targeting specific homeowners and trying to drive them out. But I couldn't do this alone. It was time to escalate things. I reached out to the FBI. I wasn't sure how to approach the FBI, but after doing some research, I discovered that there were laws in place for cases of real estate fraud, conspiracy, and environmental violations. The HOA had crossed the line in several areas, and I wasn't about to let them get away with it. I contacted an agent from the FBI's white-collar crime division, a woman named Agent Laura Stevens. First, she was skeptical. "Mr. Thompson, I understand your frustration, but the FBI doesn't typically handle HOA disputes. This is something the local authorities should be addressing," she said, her voice measured and calm. "I get that, but this isn't just an HOA dispute. This is about criminal activity. I have evidence that they're not just breaking the rules, they're committing fraud, environmental violations, and possibly racketeering. They're using their position to make money by forcing people out of their homes." There was a long pause on the line, and then Agent Stevens spoke again, her tone serious. "All right, Mr. Thompson. We'll need to see your evidence before we can take any action. But if what you're saying is true, this goes beyond the HOA. It's larger than you think. Trust me, it's bigger than I thought too," I said, my voice tinged with frustration. "But I need your help." With Agent Stevens on board, things began moving faster than I could have imagined. I kept gathering more evidence, and Agent Stevens started coordinating with local authorities to secure the documentation I had collected. The FBI could work with local law enforcement, but this wasn't just a simple property dispute anymore. It was something much larger. The HOA board, led by Judith Winters, had been embezzling funds, manipulating property values, and coercing homeowners into complying with their illegal demands. They had been covering their tracks for months, but with Agent Stevens' help, we were beginning to peel back the layers. The pressure was mounting, and I could feel it. Every time I stepped out of my house, I felt like I was being watched. Every time I went to check my mail, I feared another letter would arrive, another threat that would chip away at my resolve. But I wasn't about to back down. Then came the day I found out about the landscaping contract. It was a lead I hadn't expected, but it explained a lot. The HOA's contractor, Evergreen Landscaping, had been awarded an exclusive $300,000 contract to maintain the neighborhood's common areas. But the kicker? They were also responsible for monitoring compliance, meaning they had a hand in deciding who got fined, who got targeted, and who was left alone. I had the smoking gun, and I wasn't afraid to use it. Agent Stevens and I met one afternoon to discuss the next steps. She had news. "We've been able to confirm some of the things you suspected. The landscaping company's contract, the suspicious fines, and a few other things point to a much bigger conspiracy. I'm going to need you to be careful. We're about to go in, and once we do, there's no turning back." My heart pounded as I thought about the consequences. But then I remembered my family, my wife, my kids. This wasn't just about me. This was about all of us. And I wasn't going to let these people ruin our lives. The day of the confrontation had finally arrived. The FBI had done their work behind the scenes, and everything was in place. We had enough evidence now that we could take down the HOA board for good. But I wasn't prepared for how much bigger this was going to get. Agent Stevens had arranged a meeting at the HOA office. It wasn't a raid yet, but the atmosphere was tense. I could tell this wasn't just about getting the board members arrested, it was about sending a message. A message that we weren't going to let anyone push us around anymore. As I walked into the HOA office with Agent Stevens, my heart raced. The place was quiet, sterile, and far too neat, just like the people who ran it. I could almost smell the arrogance in the air, the feeling that they were untouchable. Judith Winters was sitting at her desk, wearing that same smug look she always had, like she knew something no one else did. And beside her, Marcus Jenkins, her loyal enforcer, was ready to make sure nothing got in her way. "Mr. Thompson," Judith said, her voice dripping with condescension, "I see you've decided to show up. I hope you understand that this is a very serious matter. Your actions have caused quite a stir around here." I stood tall, making sure to hold my ground. "No, Judith. What's serious is the way you've been running this place like your personal fiefdom. It's time someone took a stand, and it looks like that someone is me."
Her eyes narrowed, but she remained calm. "You've been spreading lies, trying to make us look bad. But none of it is true. You have no proof." Agent Stevens stepped forward, her presence commanding. "Actually, Mrs. Winters, we do. We've been collecting evidence for weeks, and we have everything we need to charge you and your board for embezzlement, conspiracy, fraud, and environmental violations. This isn't a game anymore." Judith's expression faltered for a moment. "What are you talking about?" she snapped, clearly caught off guard. I pulled out the flash drive I had been holding onto for weeks, the one with all the damning evidence on it. "I'm talking about all the illegal actions you've been taking behind closed doors. I'm talking about you using the HOA to manipulate homeowners and enrich yourself." I plugged the flash drive into the computer and hit play. The screen flickered, and suddenly, the room was filled with the grainy, unmistakable footage of Marcus pouring chemicals into my rainwater collection tanks. The timestamp, the GPS coordinates, all of it was right there, right in front of them. Judith's face turned white. "You think you can just—" "I think we can," Agent Stevens interrupted, her voice firm. "You've been caught. And you've been caught red-handed." The footage continued, showing Judith and Marcus talking in the car before the chemical poisoning, discussing how they would force me out and take over the landscaping contract for the entire neighborhood. The entire room went silent as the reality of what was happening sank in. Marcus's face turned ashen, and he sank into his chair. "I didn't mean to," he started, his voice trembling. "No more lies," I said, my voice cold. "You poisoned my garden. You poisoned the heart of my home. And now you're going to pay." Judith wasn't done. She was always 5 steps ahead, or so she thought. As the footage played, I could see her eyes darting around, trying to find a way out of this. But there was no way out. Not anymore. "Look, we can work this out," Judith said, her voice shaking, but still laced with arrogance. "This doesn't have to go any further. I can make sure you're compensated for your garden. I'll fix this. Just let's talk privately." But I wasn't interested in her empty promises anymore. I had seen how she had manipulated the entire neighborhood for her own gain. This wasn't about fixing things. It was about holding her accountable for her actions. "This is bigger than you, Judith," I said, stepping closer. "You've been abusing your position for years. You've ruined people's lives for profit. And now it ends." Agent Stevens nodded, signaling to the other agents who were standing outside the office, waiting for the right moment. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, environmental violations, and a number of other charges. It's over." Judith opened her mouth to say something else, but the words didn't come. Instead, her face twisted in anger as the reality of the situation set in. The jig was up. As Agent Stevens read Judith and Marcus their rights, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't just a victim of the HOA. I was part of something bigger. We had fought back, and now it was time for them to face the consequences. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The media picked up on the story, and before long, the entire neighborhood knew what had been happening behind closed doors. The once feared HOA was in disarray, its members either resigning or being removed under investigation. The community rallied around the truth, and something incredible began to happen. The fear that had kept everyone in line started to fade. Neighbors who had been too afraid to speak out for years suddenly found their voices. People who had been targeted by the HOA came forward, sharing their stories, joining the fight for justice. The new board, which was elected by the residents, was transparent and fair. They promised that the community would come together to rebuild, but this time, it wouldn't be under the oppressive control of people like Judith Winters. For the first time in a long time, Pine Hill Estates felt like a true community. People actually started talking to each other again, sharing their stories and supporting one another. No longer were they afraid of the HOA's threats or intimidation. As for me, I could finally breathe again. My family was safe. Our home was ours once more. And the community had learned a valuable lesson. When you stand up to injustice, you can change the world. It had been a long, hard road, but we had won. I walked through my front yard one evening, the sun setting on the horizon, and took a deep breath. My garden, what was left of it, was starting to recover. The heirloom tomatoes, the peppers, the plants that had been poisoned by Judith's greed. Those plants were still here, still fighting for survival, just like I had. I thought about everything that had happened, the letters, the threats, the fear. But in the end, I realized something important. Sometimes it takes a fight bigger than yourself to change things. And sometimes, when the HOA thinks they've taken everything from you, you find out that the only thing they couldn't take was your spirit. The battle wasn't just about my garden or my house or even about the money. It was about standing up for what's right no matter the cost. It was about knowing that even when the odds are stacked against you, you can still win if you have the courage to fight. The HOA thought they had control over this community. But what they didn't realize was that the people had the power all along. You can't let bullies run your life, I said one evening, sitting with my family on the porch. And sometimes, it takes something big, something drastic to make them see that.